All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'll pray for us. Father, thank you for your goodness and thank you for allowing us to be at Bryan College. What a privilege it is to try to think your thoughts after you. I pray you help us today. I pray you help me as a teacher, help us as a class. Pray you would use something as ordinary as a college lecture to be a means of grace in all our lives. I pray that we'll love you more and love other people more. I ask that you would, for the sake of Jesus, open our minds to the scriptures. We pray all this in Christ's name. Amen. So we are in section 3 of 28 of our BIB 115 class. I don't think I have the attendance quiz set up rightly today. I forgot to do that. So if you make sure you sign in, I'll make sure that you get the points for today. So make sure the sign-in sheet gets all the way on that side of the room. And once you've done that, if you would turn off your electronic devices, I would appreciate that. So what we're going to look at today is this idea of the Trinity. What is the Trinity? When people say Trinitas, the three in oneness, the triunity, I guess is what that word means in the Latin, the question often comes up, is that a made-up doctrine or is that actually in the Bible? The idea that God is one, there's only one God in contrast to all things that aren't the one God, and yet within that one God, that there is an undefined threeness, and that threeness includes Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The question is that a made-up doctrine? Is that really in the Bible? And so that's what we're going to look at today. If we have time, we'll look at some of the meta-narrative connections in the Bible. And then if we have time, Jesus as the new tabernacle. So I said the other day that there's a connection between John 1 and Genesis 1. And if we want to kind of spell it out a little clearer, there's a connection between John 1, 1 to 5, and Genesis 1, 1 to 5. When John wrote John 1, he meant us to have in mind, and it was writing to an audience that had in mind Genesis 1. And I just want to read these to kind of make that point. John writes, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him. Without him, not anything was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. When John wrote his gospel, he's being a missionary for Jesus. He's trying to convert people to Christianity, and that's how he starts his gospel. What's interesting about that is the connection that John is making with Genesis 1, 1 to 5. And if we read that, you'll perhaps hear some of the connections he's making. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And this word deep is also the word abyss or bottomless pit. In fact, it's a description of hell in Revelation. And the Spirit of God, the Ruach of God, was hovering over the faces of the waters, and God said, let there be light. And there was light, and God saw the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, day one. And you come to that, and there's some pretty obvious connections. You've got in the beginning. You have this word God. We're going to look at that in Hebrew. That's a really strange word. And then you have this idea of God creating everything. And you go to John, and you have this view of plurality and unity. You have the idea of creation. All things were made through him. And so it's clear that somehow John is meaning for us to interact between those two texts. Now, in English, that's powerful. If we were native Hebrew speakers, what John just did would have blown our minds, because there's a really interesting thing in the Hebrew text of Genesis 1, and I want to try to explain it to you. I love this diagram by Chris Harrison. He went through, and every place in the Bible where there is a cross reference, he went through and connected them all. And this is his drawing of that. You can see how the entire Bible is like one massive cross reference. The beginning and the end are connected. Beginning of books are connected to beginning of other books. And what we're doing in John 1 and Genesis 1 is exactly what's described in this drawing. There, the Bible is one massive textual interplay between sections. I want to say too that if you ever find anything in the Bible confusing, just start reading the parallel. And very often, the meaning will just jump off the page. When I became a Christian, I suppose it's 45 years ago, one of the things that I was really concerned about is, can the Bible stand up to rigorous scrutiny? That is, if you just came to the Bible and looked at it, and you looked at the doctrine of Christianity, could Christianity stand on its own 2 feet to careful, rigorous scrutiny? What I can say is 45 years later, that question was so significant to me that I started taking biblical languages 44 years ago, and I believe the Bible is truer today than I ever believed then. The more looked at the Bible carefully, the more I've become convinced that the Bible is from God, and it absolutely can stand up to our questions. And I want to look at one of those things today. So this is the text of the Hebrew Bible. Now, can I get a witness? Does that look scary to you? Like when you look at that, like, wow, that is incredible. This is so old that this writing is within 600 years of being the oldest written anything on planet Earth. The only thing, if this is as old as it claims to be, the only thing older than this on planet Earth are the Egyptian hieroglyphics in the pyramids. This is so old that when you read it from right to left. All old languages are like that. You read from right to left. The idea is that smart people in antiquity were left-handed, and languages that would write that way favor someone who's left-handed. We don't know why, but something happened where most people became right-handed. And so most languages flip, where it's much easier to write a language this way if you're right-handed. But this is so old that it's pre-flip. Other languages flip to write the other way. This is so old it's pre-flip. This is so old that when it was written, you had to know the language well enough to be able to supply your own vowels when you read it. This text, from my copy of the Hebrew Bible, it kind of like training wheels supplies the vowels that we need, but our Torah scroll in the library doesn't have the vowels. You have to be able to supply them on your own. So this text, all three of the world's monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all three of those religions believe that this text is from God. All three of those religions claim this text as revelation from God. And I think I read it out loud to you the other day, and you remember how beautiful it was? Yes. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all three claim that this writing is from God. Anybody who's ever read this writing in the original recognizes that there's a problem. As soon as you read it, there's an immediate problem in this text, and every single person who's ever read it in the original recognizes this problem. And I want to try to walk you through it if I could. This document claims to be about 3,400 years old. So this year, our country will celebrate its 250th anniversary. If you take our country and multiply that history times 10, and then add 1,000 years to that, you get to about the time this was written. That's how long this text is being recognized as from God. It's read right to left, and the second and third words in this text create a massive problem that hardly anybody can explain. And I want to try to walk you through that problem today. So these are the first 7 words in the Hebrew Bible. But the first word, so we're starting here. So the first word is the word Bereshit. The be part of that word means in. So in Hebrew, if you're going to say in something, you just stick be on the front of the word, and that's our word in. And Reshit is related to the word Rosh, head. So you can kind of perhaps hear how it says Bereshit, in beginning. So technically, in beginning is what it says. And there's not really that much debate about those in beginning, Bereshit. Pretty much everyone comes to it and does it exactly that way. No problem at all. It means in beginning, in the beginning. The second word is the word bara. And this word in Hebrew means he created. He created. When we get to what he created, This word et, I don't know if you can see this word also is et. The et goes before what he created. So the heavens, oddly in Hebrew, the dual heavens. No one really has a great explanation of why it's called the dual heavens. And the singular earth. So in the beginning, bara is he created, what did he create? He created the heavens and he created the earth. And there's not any debate about that. Everybody who's ever read this text will say, yes, that's exactly what it's saying. Now, when we get to this word, he created, in Hebrew, that's written in such a way that it couldn't be said if the creator was a woman. Like when you look at that word bara, the God who is creating is describing himself as a man and not a woman in Hebrew. Now, how many of you have had a foreign language? What are some of the foreign languages you've had? What are some of the foreign languages? Whether took French, very good. Other, yes, Spanish, good. How many of you have had Spanish? Very good. Other languages, what have you had? Yes, German. Now that's a hard language. Joke is, well, you know, English you can learn in a day. Uh, Reading French you can learn in a week. And the joke is German you can learn in the rest of your life. Can I get a witness? Like German is very hard. Um, if you take a foreign language, have any of you had Latin? Very good. And do you remember memorizing this chart? Mo amasamat, amasamatis. I love, you love, he, she, or it loves, we love, you love, they love. That little bit in green that you add to the end, when you put it on a verb, that tells you who did the action. And I imagine when you learned German, you had to learn this conjugation chart. And so the little red things on the end, that tells you, is it an I, is it a they, is it a we? And I imagine when you learned French, you had to memorize this, and the little bits on the end tell you who does the action. And I have not learned Spanish, but I imagine those of you who've had Spanish had to learn this conjugation chart, and the little bits on the end there tell you who did the action. So these are called conjugation charts. Nearly every language in the world has a conjugation chart except English. English doesn't really have a conjugation chart. We do everything with personal pronouns. Our language is much less sophisticated than most other languages in the world. When you come to Hebrew, Hebrew has a massive conjugation chart. And this is what it looks like. In Hebrew, you have a different conjugation if you want to say he killed versus she killed. Now, none of our languages do that. It's just third singular. It can be a man or a woman. And the rest of the sentence tells you whether it's a man or a woman. In Hebrew, the actual verb tells you whether it's a man or a woman. And so this is the paradigm chart. They run them backwards in Hebrew. I don't know why, but he killed, she killed, you man killed, you woman killed, I killed, they killed, you all man kill, you all women plural kill, we kill. And so when you memorize Hebrew, you have to memorize that conjugation chart, and you say it many, many times. Katal, katal, katalti. So what that means is when you come to the word bara, the only place the word bara can fit in that conjugation chart is third masculine singular. So there's one person who created everything that exists, and that one person is describing himself as a man versus a woman. Now, how many of you are following with me? Like, do you understand that point? Maybe kind of. And there's no really problem. Everybody who's ever looked at it says, yeah, that's what it says. There's one entity who created everything that exists, and that one entity is describing himself as a singular man, not a woman. The problem comes when we get to the third word. And do you remember when I read that out loud by Dale Elohim? Can you hear how that Elohim is just like over and over and over? And that's where our problem is. There's a massive problem when it describes who the he is. In the beginning, he created. And who is the he who created? The he who created is Elohim. And that's where we have a massive problem. Now, I want to try to persuade you of something, and you probably won't believe me when I say this, but I think you probably know more Hebrew than you think you know. And let me see if I can prove that to you. You know that special angel that God put to keep people out of the Garden of Eden? You call one of those angels a cherub. What do you call a bunch of those angels? Cherubim. You know, the flaming, flying, snake-like creature in Isaiah 6, a snake that's on fire in God's presence, flying around with wings. Picture is honestly pretty terrifying to me. A snake that's on fire, flying in God's presence. But one is called a seraph. What are a bunch of those called? Seraphim. In fact, if you come to any word, any masculine word in the Hebrew language, and you want to convert that word from a singular to mean more than two, so Hebrew has what's called a dual, a'im. So you have the singular, the a'im is two, and then more than two. The way you convert it to more than two is you add im on the end. So the word horse in Hebrew is the word sus. Anybody in here named Suzanne or I have a daughter whose middle name is Suzanne. I think in Hebrew that means she who is graceful with horses. Sus is the word horse. If you wanted to describe three or more horses, what would you do to sus to make it three or more horses? What would you add to the end of it? Susim. Oddly enough, in Hebrew, the word dog is fish. My Hebrew professor told me that Hebrew is the only language where who is he, and he is she, and me is who, and dog is fish. And that's completely true in Hebrew. If you're describing one fish, you call it a dog. What would a bunch of fishes be in Hebrew? Dogim. Add im to the end. In fact, we could go through 10,000 words in Hebrew, and I could give you the word, and you can convert that to three or more simply by adding im on the end of that word. Are you with me? So tell me then, what's the difference between the word Eloah and the word Elohim? And how how would you normally translate Elohim, given that's how the language works? What would Elohim mean? What would it mean? It would mean three or more entities who are God. Now, why don't we translate the word Elohim, gods, in Genesis 1:1? And how do you know there's one God in Genesis 1:1? Because of the He created. In the beginning, there is an entity who is called a He. And that singular masculine entity, He, is then described as Elohim, plural. Now, is that baffling? Now, this is a text. Every person who's ever read this text knows this is how it works. If you did a hyper-literal translation, you would have to do it something like this. In the beginning, He, that is the plural entity Elohim. He created everything that there is. In other words, the Hebrew Bible describes the one God of monotheism as He, they, or if we put it another way, three words into the Hebrew Bible, the one God of the Bible is going to describe himself as an I, we. He is equally, eternally, absolutely an I, who equally, eternally, absolutely is also a we. And there's nothing like that God that exists in the universe. Now read John 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. That's plurality, right? And the Word was God. That's unity. The same was in the beginning relationally with God. All things were made through Him. And apart from Him, there was made not one thing that was made. In Him was life. What's really interesting about that, when you look at the Greek translation, it's the word Zoe. In Him was Zoe. And what's interesting is the Greek translation of Genesis 1, it isn't Adam and Eve, it's Adam and Zoe. Chava is simply the Hebrew word for life, and so the Greek translators translate it as life. So in English, the word Eve, well, when people learn Hebrew, there's a letter that none of us Westerners can say. And most Hebrew professors say, don't even try to say it. It's called a het. And so in Hebrew, Eve's name is Chava. Chava. Well, we can't say that, so we just said Ava or Ava or Eve. So that's how we get Eve in English. But what the Septuagintal translators did is, rather than just spell her name out, Chava, they actually translated what her name meant, life. Chava is life in Hebrew. And so John, well, remember how we talked about how Eve was made, that Adam was wounded in his side, and then God took the essence and house built a woman? Do you see how John's playing with that story? In him was Zoe, and the Zoe was the light of humanity. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. All of these are connected. Bereshit, bara, Elohim. Now, I said that all three world monotheistic religions in the world, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, all believe that this sentence is from God. Which of those three is the only one who teaches that God is a plurality within a unity? It's Christianity. So when I hear someone on YouTube say, oh, the Trinity is a made up doctrine, I feel sorry for that person because they've sat under people who probably never even read the Hebrew Bible. But from my reading of the Hebrew Bible is 1,600 pages long. This phenomenon appears multiple times on every single page of the Hebrew Bible. A similar phenomenon we're going to look at another time appears with the word Jehovah or YHWH. That does this weird thing thousands of times. And so when you come to that, it's almost like you're watching an M. Night Shyamalan movie, and the director has put all these hints in the story that if you're not looking for them, you probably won't see them at first, but it doesn't mean that they're not there. And that's the case with this plurality within the basic unity of God. The very first verse in Genesis introduces a grammatical riddle in that the word translated God, Elohim, is really a plural word. If you were taking a Hebrew quiz and you had the word Elohim, you would translate that gods, plural. We can't translate it like that in English because it wouldn't make sense. In the beginning, God's created the heavens and the earth, because we don't differentiate our verbs in singular and plural like that. They do. And so what we've chosen to do is to preserve the singularity in the word God in English, but we've done it at the expense of recognizing that this is actually a plural word. I think sometimes we as Americans can be very arrogant about our language. I don't know if any of you have traveled anywhere, but it's not uncommon to fly to Tokyo and walk up to a counter and just start speaking English and assuming that the person there will understand English, because most educated people in the world do understand English. You know what the joke the rest of the world has about Americans? I don't know if you know that this is absolutely a joke that other countries. Do you know what you call a person who can speak three languages is? Trilingual. Do you know what you call a person who can speak two languages? Bilingual. And do you know what you call a person who speaks one language? An American. Because we don't learn foreign languages, right? We assume everybody else should learn our language. And sometimes we're arrogant about that. I remember I got humbled one time. Went to the Louvre. My mom and sister came over. We were studying in England, and my wife and I, my mom and sister went to Paris. It was great. Went to the Louvre and spent it all day there. We got hungry. We went to the basement. There's a McDonald's in the basement. And I had been learning a little French. I was so proud I could read a little French, you know. So I'm walking up to the counter, and there's this little teenage girl there, and I'm trying to figure out how to order in French. And my French is horrible. Like, I can read French, but like spoken French is terrible. So I'm trying to figure out how to order in a McDonald's in French. And this little girl, McDonald workers, looked at me before I had said a word and in perfect English said, just use English. She knew I was trying to figure out how to order in French, and she knew I was an American, and she spoke to me in perfect English. That's what the rest of the world can do, and that's what hardly any of us can do, and we should really change that. So that's if you get a chance in life to add a language or two, you should take that. It will make you, um, it will help you in your intellectual endeavors. What we see here is a grammatical riddle that's perfectly explained by the doctrine of the Trinity. Thus, the very first words of the Bible introduce a view of God which states that God is a plurality within a unity. The God of the Bible, 3 words into the Hebrew text, is a he, they. And you hear that all through. Let us create man in our image. And what we'll look at is it even gets more spectacular than that. Now, before we go on, questions about that? Yes. That's exactly what the text means. It technically means that there's a plural entity more than 2. That's what the "im" versus the "aim" ending will mean. We're not told how many more than 3. We're just told it's more than 2. And the entire Bible assumes that that tension with the first 3 words. Other question. All right. So when you look at John 1 and Genesis 1, and you look at God, this is a very stunning revelation of who that one God is. An undefined plurality within the basic unity. In the beginning, he, that is Elohim plural, he, and you can see then what John has done, was the Word was with God, the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. He, it's almost he, they, in the beginning, God, he, they, God created. But there isn't an elegant way to do that in English, so we just do in the beginning, God created. And heaven and earth is how Jewish people say all things. And you can see that all things were made through the Logos. And the Bible is going to say it's the glory of God to hide things, the glory of kings to search them out. And if you want to know the right way of approaching the Bible, it's to realize that it's a treasure that God has hidden things for his people to find. I remember Lynn and I were in England, and my doctoral research was on the use of YHWH, or Jehovah passages, from the Old Testament, how the New Testament writers take those and apply them to Jesus. And I was in the PhD program before I graduated for 4 years. And in England, in the PhD programs, you don't take any classes. It's pure research. So for 4 years, I researched all day, every day, Yahweh passages that are applied to Jesus and what that likely meant to a first century Jewish audience. And that research project was delightful. We lived in one of those English row houses. You see them, they're like 3 stories tall and they're like 100 in a row. We lived in one just like that. And 4 years, all day, every day, I researched that problem. One day, I was researching that problem, and we were so poor as students that we couldn't really run the heat very good. So I'm in this row house. I'm freezing to death studying. And we've got a little English cat over there. And the only warm place in the house was my lap. So that little cat would come sit in my lap while I read books and studied all day, every day. So I'm sitting there studying this problem. And on the back door, there's a knock. I open the back door, and there are two ladies there, an older lady and a younger girl, maybe a college girl, I don't know, but two ladies, and I could tell that they were Jehovah's Witnesses. And Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe that the word Jehovah is rightly applied to Jesus. And I kind of felt sorry for the two of them. Like, of all the doors they could have knocked on, you know, like, I'd been studying that problem 2 years in my master's, so I'm 6 years or however long into this. And had a very polite conversation, and they were saying, well, we believe exactly the same thing you believe. And I said, well, I don't think you do, because I believe that Jesus is Jehovah, and you don't. And the lady, I forget which one, I think it was the older lady, said, well, you can't prove that to me from the Bible. And I said, do you have a translation there? And so, yeah. And I said, can you find Isaiah 45? And they found it. I said, can you read it? And so Isaiah 45 is this monotheistic passage, and it has this verse, I am Jehovah, that is my name. My glory I don't give to anyone else. I, Jehovah, I am He. I am Jehovah, there is no other. And so this lady is reading through this, and I can feel that she just is pitying me because I've just walked into her trap, and she is so happy. Like, she is destroying my non-biblical Trinitarian theology, you know, reading through. And so she's kind of just happy. And I think it was the college girl that was reading, but I could tell the woman was really happy. And so we got to verse 22, and it says, like, I am YHWH, that is my name. My glory I don't give any. And I stopped him. I said, now, if I can find a place in the New Testament where one of these verses is applied to Jesus, is that going to be a problem for you? And I forget which one of them said, but one of them said, you'll never find a verse like that. And I said, can you read verse 23? To me, every knee will bow and every tongue swear. I said, isn't that applied to Jesus in Philippians 2:11? And this little college girl is standing there with her Bible. The two of them standing. I think the cat's running in and out, you know. And she's standing there with the Bible. And this trainer lady, I've never seen anything like it in my life. It was like she was blocking a basket. She, with both her hands, hit that girl's Bible and took it out of her hand. So the girl's reading like the Jehovah's Witness translation, you know. And she read it, and the trainer lady just grabbed it out of her hand and said, we've got to leave. And they left. I thought, wow, that was weird. You know, like, didn't know what to think about it. So about 6 months later, a buddy of mine and I would read Hebrew every day together, and we would walk over to the student union. We were poor PhD students, so the only place we could really get a good meal was the student union. We'd go over there and we would order cheeseburgers and read Hebrew every day for month after month after month. I think I have that Hebrew Bible still, and it's got cheeseburger grease all over every page where we're just reading, you know, together. So I'm walking over to the student union to get a cheeseburger. This little college girl comes up and stops me, and she said, "Do you remember me?" And I wanted to say, "Lady, I've been reading so many books, I don't even remember myself." Like I said, I'm sorry, I don't. I mean, I was in that research fog. They're having us read German things, and like I said no, and she said, "I just want you to know I came by your house about 6 months ago," and she said, "I just want you to know I don't believe a word you said," and she just kind of went off, and I thought, lady, the hounds of heaven are after you. Like it bothered her so much that 6 months later she's trying to find the answer. But there is no answer except the one Christianity gives in the Bible. There is a plurality within unity, and that plurality includes Jesus, not excludes Jesus. We're going to see that in this class, and I do hope that both that girl and the lady will continue to look. Um, I have had that same interaction here, and it's not gone as well, I think, because I was maybe a little too arrogant uh, with it, but it's the truth that even monotheistic language is applied to Jesus. Any questions before we move on to a second point I want to make this morning? Any questions or follow-up? Okay, New Testament. She will bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. So the word Jesus is connecting to the idea that Jesus has a people and that he will save them from their sins. What's true about every name in the Bible? It means something. And if we want to be intelligent readers of the Bible, what should we ask whenever we come to any name in the Bible? What does it mean? So in Greek, so the way it's actually written in the text, this is the word Jesus. And the way you say it in Greek is Jesus. And you might hear, if you're Spanish, it's very common to have people have a name in Spanish, Jesus, right? And you can hear it's just translating the Greek Jesus. This is the word that's translated Jesus. This is the word that's translated Joshua, Jesus. What do you recognize about the name Jesus and the word Joshua in Greek? It looks like exactly the same word to me. And that's true. The word Jesus and the word Joshua are exactly the same word in Greek. Jesus' name is Joshua. Now, what can you tell me about Joshua in the Old Testament? Who was Joshua in the Old Testament? He was the leader of the Israelites after Moses. Could Moses get the people of God into the land flowing with milk and honey? And why couldn't he get them in? Because he had broken God's law. He couldn't get the people in. And so this really cool guy came after Moses, this really cool guy whose name is Jesus. And the Jesus could get the people in the land flowing with milk and honey. Do you see the meta-narrative connection that Jesus is the new Joshua? Or maybe we would say Jesus is the super Joshua. Jesus and Joshua are the exact same word in Greek. Now, this is really interesting. So if you see on this map, the place where Joshua crossed the Jordan River is right at number 1. That's called the Abel Shittim crossing. It's really hard to go there today because they won't let you they won't let you go from Israel to Jordan. You have to go to Jordan first and then Israel. And so the closest I've ever been to this place is we flew into Amman, Jordan, and we saw some stuff on the east side, but we didn't actually get to this place. It's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, and we couldn't really get there. I'm sad about that, but if you go there, this is the place where Joshua crossed the Jordan River with Israel. Moses died up on the hill near Mount Pisgah. If you want to put that in perspective, imagine there were a building maybe 3 times as tall as Mercer. And imagine you went to the top of that building and you looked south, and imagine you could see the Walmart in Soddy Daisy. So it's about 26 miles from here. That's the same distance of Moses to Jerusalem. So he went up on a mountain, he looked over on a clear day, you can see it. It's about 26 miles away, but he couldn't go in because he had broken God's law and he died. Jesus comes along, he brings the people through the Jordan River, and they go on a conquest of the promised land. And you say, Judd, why are you telling me this? So what? Do you know where Jesus was baptized? In fact, do you know where there's been a church marking where Jesus was baptized for almost 2,000 years now? That church is right there. The lawgiver couldn't get people into Eden. Jesus can get all of us back to the Garden of Eden. Jesus is the true Joshua, and Jesus can get us into the promised land. I don't know if you've ever made this connection in the story, but when Adam and Eve rebel against God, they get kicked out of the garden, right? God clothes them royally. We'll probably look at that in class someday. We'll not do it today, but God kicks them out because as sinners, they can't live with a holy God. I don't know if you've ever realized this in the story, but what does Joshua do when he goes into the land flowing with milk and honey? What do they do to the people who are living there? Destroy them, drive them out, right? And that sounds very harsh to us. And maybe we don't realize that the Canaanites living in the land were some of the most depraved people who've ever lived. The depravity of the Canaanites was so great, I can't even describe what they were into. I mean, it would be too offensive to describe what they were into. But they coupled this massive fertility cult depravity with the murder of infant children. They were wicked, wicked people. And so Joshua goes in with the people of Israel and they drive the Canaanites out. We think, okay, I've got that. The interesting tension in this story, do you know who Judah is in this story? One of the 12 patriarchs. Do you know he's married to a Canaanite? Did you know he fathered children with his own daughter-in-law? And his defense was he thought she was a prostitute. God puts the spear in Judah's hand and says, go kill all the Canaanites. What's problematic with that? He's one. So let me ask this, and you see if this really made it click for me when I was able to see this. Imagine that God gave you the same deal right now that he gave Adam. And he said, I will put you in heaven right now. I'll give you all the money you could ever spend. You'll walk on gold. You'll have a a mansion suite in my mansion, an alone place, it says in Greek. You will live in a place that is utter bliss. You'll never die, but here's the deal. You get to stay as long as you follow the rules. If you follow the rules, you can stay forever. If you don't follow the rules, you'll get kicked out. Would that be good news to you? So I see a lot of people saying, yes, I want to say no to me, like if God offered me that deal. Is there anything wrong with God's law? God says, hey, this is a great idea. Don't kill anybody. Like, is there anything wrong with that law? Here's another great idea. Hey, don't mess with anybody else's marriage. Hey, here's another great idea. Don't steal anybody's stuff. There's another great law. Don't lie about anybody. And hey, if somebody else has a brand new black Mercedes diesel four-door sedan, don't be jealous that they have it. Just be happy for them. Are there anything wrong? Is there anything wrong with those laws? Do we follow those laws today? There's nothing wrong with the law. There's everything wrong with me. Like if you ever just had a day where you said, I know God wants me to do this, I'm just not going to do it. So would it be good news if God put you in heaven right now as you exist, right now in heaven, and said, I'll make you the same deal I made Adam, perfectly obey the law and you get to stay. But if you don't perfectly obey, you get kicked out. Is that good news? It wouldn't be good news to me because I know me. There's nothing wrong with God's law. There's everything wrong with me. Now, can you see the beauty of the promise? You will call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. It isn't the Canaanites out there the problem. It's the Canaanite right here that's the problem. He's the super Joshua, but he's not killing the Canaanite. He's transforming us. And I don't know if you've ever made this connection in the story, and we'll end here. There's a Canaanite king called the king of Ai, and Ai means destruction. And he had done wicked things. He had done all that horrible stuff, kids, depraved stuff. And God said, when you go in there, I want you to get rid of that guy. He's the ultimate bad guy in our movie. Like he's the human trafficker, drug lord. He is the bad of the bad. And so what they did to him is they hanged the king of Ai on a tree until evening. And at sunset, Joshua commanded, and they took his body down from the tree and they threw it at the entrance of the gate of the city and raised over it a great heap of stones, which remains to their day. When they did that to the king of Ai, the surrounding kings heard, and they all banded together to come kill Israel. Deuteronomy 21 and 22 explains why it was hung on a tree. If a man has committed a crime punishable by death, and he's put to death, you will hang him on a tree, and his body shall not remain all night on the tree, but you shall bury him the same day. For the hanged man is cursed by God. You shall not defile your land that the Lord your God is giving you. So when the 5 kings banded together, it says this, afterward Joshua struck them down and put them to death, and he hanged them on 5 trees. And they hung on trees until evening, just like Deuteronomy commanded. And at the time of the going down of the sun, Joshua commanded, and they took them down from the trees, and they threw them into a cave where they had hidden themselves. and they set large stones against the mouth of the cave, which remain to this day. Help me with intertextuality here. Who else hung on a tree? Who else was taken down at evening? Who else was put into a cave? Who else had a large rock put over the mouth of that cave? And who was so righteous that no cave could ever keep him down? The story of the Bible is the story of Jesus as the new Joshua. But instead of killing the Canaanite, what he's done is become one flesh with any person who's willing to come to him by faith. Because he's one flesh with all the people who will come to him by faith, by being murdered, he unmurders those people. He died the way the Canaanite kings should have died. The same God, and this is why it's all so connected, the same God who in Deuteronomy 7 said, show them no mercy. Hey, people who do that stuff to kids, people who do that stuff, who traffic women, people who do this, they have lost the ability to live. And God says, show them no mercy. That same God, to allow anyone to come back to the Garden of Eden, received no mercy. He died on the cross as the cursed Canaanite king. And yet he did it in such a way that he could save his people from their sins. When I look at things like that, when I first studied at a secular university, so many of my teachers were trying to say Christianity isn't true, the Bible just doesn't make sense. And the more I read Greek and Hebrew, the more I realized that just isn't true. The Bible is the most elegant meta-narrative ever. The Trinity is there, 3 words into the Bible, and it's been my experience over the last 46 years. It isn't just the first page of the Bible that does it. It's every single page of the Bible that does it. And that's part of what we're going to look at together in this class. All right, so thank you. If you spoke in class, make sure you give yourself the extra credit point here. Glad to see you're taking notes. Make sure you do that 4 more times and we'll turn that first notebook in. And so I will see you on Thursday.